Interior O-line. They may trade Matthew Judon for draft picks, maybe a sign-and trade.
All right, another edition of the Krueg Show. Larry Krueger with you today, and our guest is Cyrus Saatsaz, the Warriors.
My man.
Left. They lost last night to the Phoenix Suns, a game they probably should have won. Cy is here, and of course you can catch him on his Locked On Warriors podcast, which will be going on later. But Cy is with us here on the Krueg Show with the Warrior t-shirt. Warrior hat or no, just Warrior t-shirt?
Oh, dude, no. You don't recognize the hat? This is the 2017 World Championship hat, and I'm all about like fisherman hats. And I think they made one other version like this. I got to buy that too. No, this is Warriors love, baby, through and through. How you doing, man? Good morning,
dude. Good morning. Thanks for coming on. And you know, last night was just another example of how why Phoenix is Phoenix and why the Warriors are the Warriors right now. It's like Phoenix knows how to close. Phoenix knows how to finish. They play a lot of tight games. They know how to execute down the stretch. And the Warriors, without Steph Curry, it was like they didn't know how they wanted to what they wanted to do at the end of the game, and they didn't execute, and they let another game get away. Give me your perspective on the loss.
Dude, I'm stoked. To me, all I took away from that game was positives because one. The stupid turnover at the end by Draymond was just a rhythm rust, having not played over 2 months and still getting his conditioning back, his footing back. That was just a timing mistake, dude. Like Otto Porter Jr. should have made that cut. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the play, I think the game was tied at this point or they're down 1. I don't remember the exact specifics of the score, but Otto Porter Jr. had to just make a simple cut. He would have made an easy basket and the Warriors could have won the game at that point. But Otto Porter Jr. didn't make the cut, and you've been seeing a lot of dumb turnovers from Draymond Green early in the season, early in his comeback, and that was just an example of that. That's not a mistake I see Draymond making 2 weeks from now when the real games start. You mentioned Steph Curry being out. That's a huge thing. I mean, you're right. The Phoenix Suns know how to close. They are the best regular season team in the NBA. There's no disputing that. There's no way you can argue against that. But Larry, you and I both know, man, the regular season is just the fancy preseason for the real season that counts. I was encouraged, dude, because this team looked dead in the water. Draymond Green looked dead in the water, man. You and I on the phone a couple days ago, and I brought this up on Locked On Warriors yesterday. We were talking about Draymond Green suddenly maybe being a trade asset. That's how low his stock had dropped from our perspective because, dude, he's 32 years old. He got a bad lower back. That's not a good look, man. It's time to look forward. And the fact that he showed up last night made me feel a million times better because all these games are just warm-ups for the games that are going to count in 2 weeks. And I'm encouraged, dude. I mean, I've never been more encouraged for a 4-game losing streak, for a team losing 6 of 7, for a team that has dropped to 4th in the Western Conference standings. I've never been more encouraged in my life, especially given all those negative stats I just gave you. So personally, as someone who loves this team and trying to be objective covering them, I'm pumped, sir.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, watching Draymond, when, he makes good backdoor passes and that's his game. Mm-hmm. But man, when he's off, and he's had some games this year where he's just been horrible. And it's because he's forcing these passes and the recipient of the pass is not cutting through the lane. And then he's forcing the pass into double coverage. There was a couple games earlier this year where he was just atrocious, where he just a turnover machine. And it's like, okay, if they're not, you can't force somebody to cut and it's almost like he wants to send a message like, you know what, I'm going to make this pass and I'm going to intentionally turn it over here because I want you to know to cut. but it's like, you know what? You're not the coach, and all it really amounts to is a turnover. And it's very frustrating to watch. So
I agree, man. But in his defense, and I don't want to be like Draymond's propaganda machine here, but in his defense, these kind of mistakes were not happening before the injury. Like we weren't seeing these kind of plays from him in December, January before like his calf tightened up, and which led to the diagnosis of the lower back issue. He wasn't making these kind of mistakes, and maybe that's just a thing where him and Otto Porter Jr. need more time, because again, they played a whole whopping total of 2 months together or 3 months before Draymond got hurt. Maybe it is, but I don't mind him being like the de facto on-court coach, because like he is the vocal leader. And a huge thing I saw last night was Draymond taking charge. Like he was literally, you heard him through the TV. I don't know if you went to the game or not. I was at home.
No, I watched it.
Yeah, so you could hear him yelling at players to move to certain places. He was yelling to Klay Thompson. His Klay was just standing around like he's, for some weird reason, has been doing a lot recently, just standing there waiting for the ball and then forcing quick shots. And the Klay's a whole other discussion I'd love to have with you, because that's not a thing I'm looking at positively right now. But I liked it. I honestly saw Draymond last night, and I saw the old Dray for the first time. I wasn't expecting perfection. You're right, dude. There were dumb turnovers, and he's been doing this since he came back. But clearly, as you know, dude, Draymond Green is someone who needs to adhere to Charles Barkley's famous adage from a month or so ago when he was trying to advise Zion Williamson. And he said, if it looks or if it tastes good, don't eat it. And Draymond is susceptible to that, man. He is not someone who's well-disciplined when it comes to diet. He is admitted to this. And he's also not someone who's fully engaged when the games don't matter, which is someone like Draymond, who's been to 5 straight NBA finals. These games don't register to him in terms of importance, man. This is a team that, for better or worse, and you could totally have complaints about this, but this is a Warriors team that when the urgency isn't there, you see it and the results show. And Draymond right now, for the most part, at least until last night, was very lackadaisical in his comeback. That 5-game road trip was just an atrocity. So I hear what you're saying, man. Like on paper, this is a regular season game. It does count. But in Draymond's eyes and in Draymond's head, he's looking at this as it's another regular season game. And I loved what his quote from a few weeks back. He said, we've won game 7s on the road. We've lost game 7s at home. So the home road thing for a team this season, or at least a player this season, just doesn't register to him. And I was just very happy the dude was engaged. That for me, that was just huge. And his stat line wasn't bad. I mean, the 10 rebounds were clutch. The 8 points, a lot of that came from like driving layups and really important free throws that he was making, which was huge. And he added the 7 assists, being the de facto point guard. You saw Jordan Poole totally lighting it up with that career high 38 points. And that was largely because Draymond was feeding him where he needed to be, and he was taking smart shots. So from my perspective, I liked it, man. I was stoked. I'm very encouraged.
Well, Draymond agrees with you. He says, we don't do moral victories around here, but I think we found ourselves tonight. Do you think they found themselves? There's only 5 games left.
Yeah, I in a large sense I do, because again, I don't think the Phoenix Suns came into this game taking the Warriors lightly. I don't think they forgot that Christmas Day game that you and I, until recently, were putting a lot of weight on, right? Like you and I think in a show a month or so ago, both said that that game showed us that the Warriors can beat the Suns. And as good as of a regular season team as the Suns are, they got beat at home. And Klay was not a part of that. And again, Klay's the thing that I'm a little worried about, and we can touch on that in a moment. But I was incredibly encouraged by that. And right now, if it's a first-round series, look, the Nuggets worry me a little bit, not as much as even 2 days ago, because now I'm confident that Draymond can at least make life difficult for Jokic. If it's the Utah Jazz thing, you and I are both really, if you're a Warriors fan, you're hoping for that. That is the ideal matchup for this Warriors team in the first round. I am much more encouraged. And honestly, dude, if Klay Thompson can figure out, he's like the last piece. I mean, obviously, Steph has to come back and shake the rust off from being gone for a month or so. We have to hope his foot is okay. But Klay Thompson has not figured this out yet, man. Like defensively, he's worrying me a little bit. I don't know if this is the right time. This is your show, dude. I feel like I'm talking forever. Go ahead. Yeah, I feel like they're ready. Yes, I do.
What'd you think of the last sequence of the game? Because I didn't like it. I know lots of people were like, oh, that's the only chance. That was the best shot they could have gotten. They would have fouled Jordan Poole. Pass the ball. Pass the ball. You don't need to hoist from half court with 2 seconds on the clock.
Right.
When you have Draymond unguarded, inside the half court line, who's, that was, a half court heave was the best shot. They needed a 3.
Yeah.
So then, and so to me, I didn't like that last shot. And yet people were like, oh, that was the best shot they were going to get. Poole was going to be fouled in the next step. And you know what? Pass the ball.
Yeah.
I thought he could have passed it to somebody. I thought they could have passed it twice and gotten a better looking three. What was your assessment of the final sequence?
I 100% agree with you. Here's what I took based off the attributions of the post game, and I wish I had a chance to join in and ask questions myself. You and I get those Zoom links, right? We can jump in and ask questions, and I sometimes do, man. I try to ask her questions when I can, but life presents itself with its own schedule. Look, the gist I got from all the post game attributions in the press conferences was this: that Kerr, I think, got in Poole's head and told him they're going to foul you, because the Suns are up 3, and the old coaching technique when a team is up 3 is to foul them immediately. So the best they can do is shoot 2 free throws, and regardless, they're not going to catch up with us. It's not going to be a tie game. And I can't remember who was reaching out to Poole. I don't know if it was Devin Booker or Paul, but somebody kind of reached their arm out to him as he was approaching half court. And I think Kerr really got in Poole's head in terms of just hammering to him, if they're going to foul you, throw it up, and so that way you could at least get 3 free throws and have a chance to tie the game. And you're right. And Poole just unfortunately really took that too much to heart, and he forced that shot up. It was not a wise shot. And I think in hindsight, Kerr could have been a little more cautious with his coaching and being like, don't just force anything, like make sure you're actually getting fouled. The lack of and again, we could talk about Kerr as a coach this year. I think both Kerr and Myers, this has been like their worst year by far in terms of their tenure with the Warriors. I mean, they're open for critique almost after every game. And that was an example of that. You're right. Poole should not have been hucking up a half-court shot when the team is down 3. But at the same time, they should not have been out of timeouts and put themselves in that position. Like, if they still had 1 timeout left, could have been a 20-second timeout. I mean, whatever the timeout was, because they ran out of them, they didn't have the luxury of basically like taking a foul, putting up 2 free throws and being down 1 and fouling and getting a second chance, because they had to run the whole court. And so Poole was in this unfortunate situation where if he gets fouled and he's not shooting, it's 2 free throws and you lose. And so I think that was just in his head a lot. But you're right, dude. That was just a bad play, bad shot, bad coaching, bad strategy throughout to not have timeouts remaining at the end of the game like that. And I'm with you, man. That was.
Well, I mean, and some of the arrogance of some of these Warrior people in the post game is just like, okay, so let's talk about that for just a second. What's a better opportunity in that situation? That you can make the first free throw, miss the second, get the rebound and tip it back in, or that you're going to make a half court heave on the run. I mean, to me, people are like, oh, well, he could have been fouled. So what? So he goes to the foul line. He makes 1. Now we all know he needs to miss the second one. There's all kinds of ways you can miss that. The ball comes off the rim. How many times have we seen somebody tip it in? I mean, you're right there. All you need is a tip in for the win at that point after you make the first free throw. To me, that's more likely than a running half court off balance heave. I mean, I didn't get that. People are like, that was the best shot they could have gotten.
No.
It's like, no. You're clouded by your love for Jordan Poole and the game that he just had. And so you don't want to be critical of a guy who was your best player at the end for blowing the final sequence. But to me, in my mind, I'd much rather have the free throw and you got to miss and tip it in. At least you're right there. You're 3 feet from the bucket. The ball could come off the rim anyway. Somebody could tip it up on the glass. That's higher percentage in my mind than the running half court hoist.
No, it is.
But
I don't get it. That's absolutely logical. When you're playing the percentages game in terms of what is your greatest odds, you're 100% correct. The only people who were disputing you were the homers in the post-game show who had Bob Myers on in the pregame show, because Bob Myers in this day and age is only talking to people that are going to lob them softballs. And those are the same people in the postgame. And I'll levy the criticism to save you any grief of just completely letting them off the hook. You're absolutely right. They, instead of levying critique on Kerr and to a lesser extent Jordan Poole, although I still think Jordan Poole was kind of like, it got in his head, man. He's a young player who had a career night, 38 points. And I think, and this is just totally speculative, but I really do think that Kerr got in his head and said, if they're coming for a foul, just shoot it up. And I've never heard, I didn't hear anything to dispute that. I didn't hear anything to make me think otherwise. So you're right. It was dumb. It was just flat out dumb. It was not the smart play, because how often does any player not named Stephen Curry make shots like that? I don't care if Jordan Poole is an incredible shooter and suddenly it could be the next coming of Steph. That's a bold statement. I'm not confirming that or acknowledging that, but Jordan Poole is starting to light it up and people are getting excited about him. But dude, he's not a half court shooter. I don't know. There's no one on this planet who isn't named Stephen Curry who is. So I'm totally with you. And again, man, this is where I levy a lot of criticism to Bay Area media, dude. And I get some grief for that, rightfully so. But if you're going to bring it, as long as you can take it back, that's fair. And they've been giving him a really long leash. And when I say him, I'm referring to Steve Kerr and Bob Myers in terms of just a lot of really poor decisions that are being made. And last night was a perfect example of that. I'm with you, man. 100%.
Let's hammer down on that a little bit more.
All right.
In your mind, who deserves more criticism? And some people would say neither deserve criticism. The Warriors didn't get, Wiseman back. Klay, obviously came back, but Draymond's been hurt. Steph's regressed. And a lot of people would say, hey, you know what? The fact that they're, right now at the 4 seed, even though it seems to be, in a free fall here at the end of the year, but that, that this group at all is in a top 4 seed, some would say is a success, and they don't want to even entertain the notion that there's any reason to criticize Kerr or Myers. But if you're in charge of this thing, are you lobbing more criticism at Steve or at Bob?
50-50. I know that might be a cop out, but I mean, because Kerr, here's an example of, in my opinion, heavy criticism that should be directed towards Kerr. And I actually did this research myself. I sat there for 3 freaking hours to do this. Are we allowed to swear in this thing, by the way? Is this clean? Is this a clean program?
Do what you need to do.
I'll try to keep it clean. Okay, I'll try to keep it clean. So basically, I did the research for 3 hours plus. I sat there and went through every single game log to determine what games Jonathan Kuminga was actually finishing. In other words, like at the end of the game when the buzzer sounded, was Kuminga out there in the lineup? And I had to, and this is where it's a little subjective, right? It's hard to determine his impact on the game. Because some of the games were blowouts, so they were winning. Some of the games that they were blowouts, they were losing. For my research, it really evened out. But the ultimate record for the Warriors when Jonathan Kuminga plays is 23-12. Steve Kerr just last week was starting him for 2 straight games. Steve Kerr a month or so ago was mentioning and talking about how Moses Moody is a player who could legitimately make an impact in the postseason. These are 2 very young players, but 2 very physically gifted players who can contribute on the court. I know last night was kind of a big moment for them if they came in, but give them that experience. For some reason, there was this very like porcelain doll treatment of a lot of the young players on this Warriors team, and I don't understand it. And I think that's, for example, one criticism I have on Kerr, because the Warriors, when Kuminga finishes games, is 23-12. That is now a vastly superior record to the Warriors when they don't have Kuminga finishing games. Yet for some reason, and there were 2 back-to-back games last week that they handily lost in that road trip, where Kuminga played 14 first half minutes and we didn't see him at all in the second half. At all. Not even a minute. And my question to Kerr is why? And I wish I was a full-time media member. Not unfortunately, but my day job is being a professor teaching journalism to kids. But I try to get in there when I can, and I do ask Kerr questions. For example, back in January, I asked Kerr, DeMarcus Cousins was out there. And I was like, are you interested in a player like DeMarcus Cousins to give you some reinforcement in the front court? And his response was, I think Looney is a legitimate center. We're happy with him. And that's a personnel question. But then Bob Myers is never making himself available unless you're literally going to shoot-arounds, which I just don't have time for. And even then, you have to establish a relationship with him. CJ Holmes, the beat writer for the San Francisco Chronicle, told me just a week ago, he still hasn't had a single conversation with Bob. So he's not that available either. And so, yeah, I would love to know, why are you standing pat? That is a Bob Myers thing where if James Wiseman was your answer, and Rick Barry told me this a couple days ago, and Larry, I'd love for you to join Rick and I on a show at some point too, where Rick, asked the same thing. He's like, why is Wiseman your one guy? Why at any point are you not bringing in a backup center? And all these championship teams that they had in that 5-year run they never had a single stretch where they had no centers. They have no centers on this roster right now. And even if Wiseman's your one guy, why not have two? Why not have a backup? I don't get any of this. Like, Bielitsa's not a center. Looney is certainly not a natural center. He's doing a phenomenal job, man. I love him. So Myers has to take blame, and whether or not he's simply, being Lacob's like puppet and all this, and Joe Lacob, and we've had a lot of talks about ownership, finances, and the pandemic, the China fiasco with Dork Elvis, where the league's lost all this money. So, I don't shed tears for billionaires, but look, if times are really rough, it would be nice if Lacob at least acknowledged it and said, hey, look, man, we're strapped. Like, at least say something, because right now Bob Myers has to take some blame for constructing a roster that is the smallest in the NBA. Maybe Kerr didn't feel safe enough for that second free throw because there's no one tall enough out there to grab a loose rebound if Jordan Poole misses that second free throw, for example. So, yeah, it's 50-50 in the sense that Kerr has been highly inconsistent, where 1 minute he says Kuminga and Moody are players who are ready to give us real minutes, then doesn't play them at all. And then Bob Myers is his credit because he constructed a roster that is diminutive. I mean, this is like Munchkin Land, Wizard of Oz stuff out there, and I've never once seen that work in the NBA ever. The Houston Rockets tried it 2 years ago, where PJ Tucker was their starting center. You saw how that turned out. Dude, I don't get it, man. So for me, it's 50-50, and I know I'm coming off negative, maybe a little angry, and I'm sorry that's the passion.
Well, no, I mean, I just think with Kerr, Kerr just gets a free pass. Everybody likes Kerr. So it's just like he just gets a free pass. There's been several times this year where he should have played Gary Payton more and didn't.
Yes.
And at this point in the year, I think it's pretty clear that nobody's a rookie at this point in the year. These guys have played endless numbers of games. So play your healthiest, freshest guys. Guys like Kuminga and Moody have a lot more energy at this point in the campaign, than some of their older players.
Yes.
But I blame Myers more than I would blame Kerr, because Myers, gambled, put all of his chips in the center of the table on James Wiseman's health, and he crapped out. So, it's like, and then here you are at the end of the year, you've got, all these mini Chiozas running around. What the hell? Take one of these guys' roster spot and go get somebody who's 6'10" or bigger. I mean, how hard is it? I mean, is there nobody on the planet that they can get to add to their front court? They're a tiny team. It's that with all kinds of redundant parts.
Yes,
and they've got
I'm
redundant
with you, man.
parts in the backcourt, and they're too small up front. And it's like they've known now for weeks that James Wiseman can't do it, and they don't care. They're just like, we'll just roll into the playoffs with what we got, and Steph will make it all better.
Well, Larry, just to add to that, they were
why not add a big?
And they were deciding, I believe, in January. It was January when Bob Myers and Kerr were basically saying, we give up on telling you when we expect Wiseman to come back because we don't know. We have no idea at this point. That was January, and yet they still did not do a single thing. They didn't make a single roster move despite that. Look, the free agent pickings have been really slim. I mean, you brought up Bismack Biyombo, who the Suns now have. That would have been awesome. Like, I don't know why they didn't make a move on that, because I think he would have been a fantastic pickup for this team. I mentioned DeMarcus Cousins, who actually knows this system. I'm hearing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that may or may not be factual, that Kerr and him have some issues. I would love somebody to talk about that so we know the truth in there, but that's staying on the wraps apparently. And then really the only option is, because we even saw like Greg Monroe, I forgot who picked him up just last week. Look, he might be a lumbering, slow big man, but take your 6 fouls. At least he's someone to give your other players.
He can pass the ball.
Yes, he's not horrible. Like I'm with you. And here's the other thing, like the Warriors, like you brought up Chiozza and their other two-way guy, Weatherspoon, who by the way is another great player we don't see enough of, even though he's been injured recently.
He can rebound. He's athletic. He's fresh. He's healthy.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But the other thing they could do, which they haven't explored, because Chiozza and Weatherspoon are both two-way players, is the Warriors could have started exploring other G League rosters. And they could have at least been looking at other bigs. And I think they have one big on their own Santa Cruz roster named Mwambe. If I might be mispronouncing him, I apologize for that. He's a 6'10" big who apparently has been lighting it up the last month or so. Dude, I'm with you, man. You convinced me. I am now 75-25 Myers Kerr in the blame split.
And I love both those guys. I love Myers. I think he's a cool guy. Kerr's really always been nice to me. And I think he's obviously one of the better coaches in the league.
Same.
But I mean, your team doesn't execute down the stretch. Your substitution pattern is chaotic at best, and
yes,
and Myers. I mean, you've this tiny little team. You're leaning on the center that couldn't get healthy.
Yep.
You had to have your doubts as it was taking him endless amounts of time to get ready. That maybe there was something amiss. You had an opportunity to add players at the deadline. You didn't. You didn't use the mid-level exception because you wanted to save your owner $25-30 million. That's fine. But I mean, let's get to, we're not the only ones ripping the front office. Let's get to Andre Iguodala.
Yeah.
Iguodala told Anthony Slater of The Athletic, and this is a quote from Iguodala, that he feels that the Warrior front office has kind of disrespected the former era. And then at the same time, he said, I also don't think you're giving the new era the opportunity to grow to be kids. So what he's basically saying is that the Warriors effed up by having an old regime and a new group. That, maybe it's in their best interest long term, but that they're disrespecting Steph and Klay and Draymond, and I guess a little bit himself, he's saying, by not basically trading away some of these young pieces and going for a veteran that could add to their mix and win now. I'll say this before you weigh in on this. Ballsy as hell for a guy making millions of dollars who hasn't played a damn this year, never plays, has played probably 10 times as many rounds of golf as he has NBA games this year, while he's getting paid millions of dollars still. And you've been out for an eternity, and now you roll in, and the first thing you do is throw your GM under the bus. So, I mean, is he right? Possibly. But I don't want to hear it from Iguodala. I really don't. Suit up and play a couple games.
This is the same guy who, in his last year of his last big contract, remember he just sat in Alameda, somewhere in the Bay Area, for almost the entire year while the Grizzlies were trying to trade him. He just sat there and just collected $16 million. No, you're dude. What that told me first. Yeah, sorry.
What's that even about? I mean, have somebody else deliver that message. Write it on a piece of paper and hand it to somebody with credibility. To sit there as you're taking off your golf spikes and polishing your 5-iron, that they're not doing enough to help you guys win. You're getting paid millions of dollars to take a Warrior underwritten vacation.
Amazing.
Whatever.
Amazing. He's that's a great, he's like the king of NBA vacations. He is, man. Like he's found a way to steal 20 some odd $20 million doing almost nothing. It's impressive. I almost want to give him kudos for that. Here, the Iggy thing, first of all, the Iggy thing told me that he's not going to be an assistant coach on this roster next year. I really thought he might have been. I don't think that's happening anymore. Iggy's a weirdo. Like has he blocked you on Twitter yet?
Give it, check back later today.
Yeah, he's blocked me. He's blocked Connor he blocked Connor Letourneau of the Chronicle. I've heard other people. And I think the reason is because I was critical of Kyrie Irving. I didn't realize him and Irving were friends. I think that's why he did it. But look, he's weird, dude. Like when you see him tweet content in general, it is the most abstract, nonsensical content I've ever seen. In his head, is probably making sense. It's not making sense to anyone else. And what else? Look, it's a valid criticism, though. I mean, if you're aiming for a championship, it is weird that you're putting all your eggs in this basket where it's like, you're right. It's like half veterans, half rookies. The rookies aren't getting a chance to kind of ease. So
what's he arguing? Is he arguing they should have traded Wiseman for Bradley Beal? Is that what he's saying?
I think
that's basically what he's saying.
I think what he's saying is that the team not using the mid-level exception and the team not pursuing more veterans was just not a good move. I mean,
is it disrespectful?
He's an employee of the team, so I guess it depends on your perspective.
Have the Warriors? Do you agree with the notion that the Warriors have somehow disrespected Draymond, Klay, and Steph by how they constructed this roster?
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
okay.
I do. Simply because, again, I mean, the mid-level exception is just sitting there. I mean, I think that's blatant disrespect. That's basically telling Steph, Dre, and Klay, hey, we love you guys, but good luck. like we're not going to give you full support. I mean, I don't know how else you can interpret the lack of spending. I mean, look, there's two schools of thoughts here. There's obviously the one school of thought, which is that they have the highest payroll by far in NBA history. But the other school of thought is for 5 years, you had some of the most friendly contracts in NBA history. Steph was on that 4-year, $44 million deal. Klay was not on a big deal. Neither was Draymond. They were barely in the luxury tax with Durant. And so they were reaping nearly $500 million in profit each of those years while spending with the luxury tax little north of 100. And so they're reaping profits year after year. And look, they're in this situation now because Lake have rewarded those three guys and with these huge contracts. I mean, Draymond's is kind of friendly, but at the same time, it's like they could have used more help. And the ownership group and Myers literally said, no, like these rookies that we're giving you should be enough. The same rookies that Kerr is now not playing at all. So, I mean, yeah, I do. I mean, because look at it this way. What if Kevon Looney, a player who throughout his entire playing history has been struggling with injuries, like he's never had a season like this where he's been healthy for the entire stretch. He's missed chunks of games. The previous 2 years, he barely played. It's amazing to me that they're now completely counting on him as their inside presence. Like, what if he gets hurt? What the hell is this team going to do? Like, right. The lack of planning for that, I think, is insulting.
Let's talk about Klay Thompson. You know, I mean, all I'll say on this front, please, as far as the Iguodala thing, is that the Warriors prioritized, saving Joe Lacob, whatever, $25-30 million.
Correct.
And you can't be the guy who, hey, I spend every dollar. I'm so passionate. I spend every dollar when you make a move like that. So you can have your announcers sing your praises. You can have the media sing your praises. You can surround yourself with yes men and live in your alternative reality. But if you want to be the guy who's like, hey man, I spend every dollar available, then you have to do it. You got to spend every dollar available.
I agree.
If you choose to not spend $30 million that you could have spent, or if you choose to take some shortcuts, you get what you pay for. Exactly. I think ultimately what it comes down to is that Joe Lacob is looking at that enormously expensive arena where 3 beers will cost you $50. and he's saying, you know what? I can't trade for Bradley Beal and have my team be crappy in 2 years because no one is going to come to my super overpriced arena if I'm not borderline competitive. And in their mind, having Kuminga, having Moody, having Wiseman, having Poole, that this will allow them to maintain a baseline of success that will keep filling their building. Is it going to result in a title? Probably not. But at least they will not hemorrhage money over the next 5 years because they'll have a baseline of success and a baseline of talent, and they won't have these dramatic ups and downs. They won't drive their team off the cliff. So I get where their decisions this year were good for their business model over the next 5 to 10 years. Yes. But I don't see where it's good if your only priority is to see Steph and Klay and Draymond get one more Larry O'Brien trophy.
That is an incredibly astute observation. I 100% agree with that. And I'll add this as well. Like Lacob and company and Gruber, really, those are the two big shots there, right? And they, and my understanding is Gruber is the one that's really flush with cash. Lacob may or may not, but they bought this team for what, like $450 million approximately back in 2012, I believe. And if my math's wrong with that, please forgive me. It might have been earlier. They just got a $275 million cash infusion from one of their minority owners who, this is a private equity group that previously, I forgot their name, they previously owned 5% of the team. With this $275 million investment, their ownership stake increased to 13%. That's $275 million, well over half of what you had spent for this team a decade ago that you just got back so that someone can claim they own a little more of your team. That's free money they just got rolling in. You can't afford to spend $30 million more just to get an important piece. Like, there were names out there that could have helped. Patty Mills would have come to this team if they offered the mid-level exception. I know he doesn't offer size, but they could have used his scoring and his playmaking. Nicholas Batum, who I know is not a center, but he's still 6'8". He's not on this roster. That's like one of your biggest guys. He's a fantastic outside shooter. He would have come for the mid-level exception. They opted to offer him a vet min, and he's like, if you're going to offer me the same money as the Clippers, I'm just going to stay in LA. They could have had, no, Paul Millsap. I know some people were like, this is a divisive topic, and some people were like, Millsap's washed. Maybe, but I still think Millsap.
Serge Ibaka at the trade deadline? He was the guy that they needed.
I don't know what they could have offered for him, but I'm with you. But the point is like they could have gotten a name or two that really would have helped this team and relieve the burden of the extreme physicality guys like Draymond, Otto Porter Jr., Looney are enduring night after night, because the law of physics states that if you're routinely battling guys who outweigh you by 50 pounds or more, your body's going to start breaking down. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that Draymond had his first major injury correlating to his lower back this year. Bielitsa missed a month or so with a same back type injury, not the same exact, but it was the same region. I don't think that's a coincidence, man. And I'm totally with you that they screwed the pooch. And I've never seen an owner and I've never seen a team win a championship when their owners take such a business first philosophy. I've never seen that. And it's unfortunate, man. It really is.
We got a comment here in the text from Cancun SMH. He says, Klay will never be the same. What? Give me your thoughts on Klay Thompson. He had a rough night defensively last night. He's not, I mean, he went 5 for 21 shooting, 1 for 10 from 3. Committed a ridiculous off-the-ball foul on Devin Booker. And just was not a good night for Klay Thompson. Where is Klay Thompson? Where are you with Klay Thompson? How, he doesn't seem like the same player on the defensive end of the floor.
Here's okay. Well, originally when he first came back, my idea was at this stage of Klay's career, why not? And especially given the Warriors are in a lot of ways trying to emulate the Spurs dynasty, right? Like originally, I think they're early part of this Warriors dynasty themselves. You saw more of the Bulls in them, I think, and then now you're kind of seeing more of the Spurs in terms of how they're trying to, elongate this level of success. My thought was, why not bring Klay off the bench, a la Manu Ginobili, right? I honestly thought like that might not be the worst idea. You're naturally staggering this roster. You're putting less pressure on Klay. Maybe he won't feel so compelled to force up shots like he's doing. But then I saw that lineup, the starting lineup, where it was Steph, Jordan Poole, and Klay on the floor together. And that lineup was so efficient offensively. And we never even saw Draymond playing with that it made me very curious to see what's going to happen when the Warriors do have a lineup with those three in there. But then that begs the question, okay, what happens to Wiggins? Are you bringing someone with that fragile of a mental state? I mean, the guy, Sharman, we heard Kobe Bryant call Dwight Howard Sharman once. You could possibly make that same, level of criticism toward Wiggins. I mean, I think that's fair. So what does that do to his psyche if you bring him off the bench? I don't know, but I really did like that 3-guard lineup with Steph, Jordan Poole, and Klay, because it took pressure off Klay. His shots were wide open because everyone always doubles Steph. But this current incarnation, man, there's no consistency. I mean, one night he looks like old Klay, where he's just totally lighting it up and you're going, whoa, like, great to see you, buddy. It's been a long time. And then there's other nights like last night where that was just a stinker, dude. Like, you could almost single-handedly lay the blame on Klay for them losing that game. But then there's like, okay, where's the loyalty factor, right? This is a guy who they're going to build a statue of him someday. His jersey is going to get retired up there in the rafters. And this is complicated, dude. This is where look, to me, the owner that embodies perfection in all sports is Eddie DeBartolo. And Eddie DeBartolo, when Ronnie Lott's days were over, when the peak had passed, let him go, man. And that was a crazy decision. You remember that, I'm sure, as well as I do. They just let Ronnie Lott walk away. He let Joe Montana walk away to continue a run of success. So in Klay's situation, I'm not saying I'm put him out to the pasture, but I am saying, dude, time to have a conversation with him and maybe say, look, man, you have been out for 2.5 years. You're not the same player you were, at least not at this point. Maybe it's time to pull back a little bit, because he's just flinging up shots like he's the old Klay. Like, he's not even hesitating. And I love the confidence, but when you're 1 for 10 from 3, that's atrocious. And like, the only nice thing about Klay, and this goes to the physics of basketball, is a Wiggins brick. Like, when he bricks a 3-pointer, these are like line drive shots. they're ricocheting like 20 feet from the rim when he misses. The rebounds are completely up for grabs. Like Klay's misses, at least they barely move from the rim, right? It's got the perfect arc, the perfect spin. It's just, I don't know if it's a rust thing or a timing thing, what's going on with him. So at least it looks good, but I would love your thoughts, man, because this is all entirely subjective.
His shot doesn't quite look the same to me. As far as how it's coming off his hand, where on the floor he's shooting from, he just doesn't seem like he's found his rhythm. And he looks a little lost out there. He's not getting the same results on either end of the floor. He's not the offensive player that he used to be, and then he's not the defensive stopper he used to be. Guys are blowing by him on a regular basis. So I'm kind of wondering. I mean, you do a regular thing with Rick Barry. Rick Barry did not finish with the Warriors. In fact, go down the list of all the greatest Warriors. None of them finished with the Warriors. Mitch Richmond, no. Tim Hardaway, no. Chris Mullin, no. Are the Warriors going to the finish line with their big three of Steph and Klay and Draymond? Are they going to the finish line with all of them? With one of them? With just Steph? Is Draymond going to finish elsewhere? Is Klay going to finish elsewhere? How do you see the twilight of their careers being handled? Are they gonna be so tied to them because they are going to have statues in front of the building, or are they going to have that coldness and move on? Do we lose? We might have lost Cy. But we can see if we can get him back. But that to me is a big question for Golden State: is are they going to the finish line with Steph, Klay, and Draymond Green? I think they are going to the finish line with Steph Curry, and I would almost guarantee that. Klay Thompson, I think they would lean towards going to the finish line, but it may take both sides to work things out. As far as Draymond Green, I don't think they're going to the finish line with Draymond Green. And that was one of the things I'll get Cy's thoughts on if we can get him back in here, is just what do the Warriors do with Draymond Green? I think this is the year that they ought to, see where it goes in the playoffs and then be open-minded to what the offseason brings as far as Draymond Green. Why do I say that? Well, I just think that, you've got a core now. It's like, do you want to align your additions with your older core and start picking up guys at the very end? Or do you want to start aligning your core with the younger core, with Kuminga and Moody and Poole and possibly James Wiseman, and try to win a title that way? And as the years go by, the older players cost a lot of money. So if you're going to add a Bradley Beal or somebody like that, that's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's not going to be easy. And I don't know. And it's going to cost you Kuminga, and it's going to cost you a Moody or a Wiseman or a Poole or some combination thereof. So do they add to their older mix and go that direction, or do they move off of Draymond Green and put more of their eggs in the basket of their new younger cast with Poole and Wiseman and Kuminga and Moody and anybody else that they can acquire? I look at the Draymond Green as a guy who, on the Warriors, if they're contending for titles, great. He's if he's back, but the thing is, he's had disc issues this year. He's got his second career already lined up at TNT. And I think you got to wonder, how long is Draymond going to be part of this mix going forward? And how long does he want to play? And I think if he had a good playoffs, and I do expect him to bounce back and have a good playoffs, if he has a really good playoff run, I think maybe you could still entice a lottery team to give you a lottery pick for Draymond Green. And I would love to see them, as much as I've always been in the camp of don't trade Draymond, do not move off of Draymond. You wouldn't have won any titles without Draymond Green and his competitiveness. And I really believe that is the case. But if you're going to the finish line with Steph and maybe even Klay as well, how do you get better? How do you get better? And how do you get more dynamic than what you are right now? And I don't know that you can without moving Draymond Green. So if I could get a lottery pick and turn that into Paolo Banchero from Duke, and maybe get a veteran piece as well, I definitely definitely would consider moving off of Draymond Green. Let's this summer. Let's hit the text. Let's hit the chat line and see what people have to say here. And it's a number of people wanting to weigh in here. And we'll just read through a few of these if we can get Cy back on. If not, we'll call it a wrap. But Clarence Speaks says, "Thank God, Larry. Yes, let it rip. We need some accountability with the Warriors' decade-long love fest." I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it. They've deserved the love fest that they've gotten. But you know what? They're not above criticism. 49er Minded says Steve Kerr's usage of Jonathan Kuminga is questionable. I wouldn't say it's questionable as much as it's just inconsistent. What is the plan? Do you want to? Is this guy ready or is he not ready? Some games they throw him out there in key moments. Other games they look like they're afraid to. My good friend Jimmy Mollet says Patty Mills is better than what we've seen from Andrew Wiggins in the second half of the year. I mean, there's no question in my mind. 49er Minded, Wiggins should have never been an all-star. He's been ass since then. I'm not a Wiggins guy, and I know he made the all-star team, but he's just very passive in his approach to the game, and he just drifts out there. And you get the feeling that if you ever really had to lean on Andrew Wiggins, that you'd be screwed, that he wouldn't be there for you when you absolutely need him. This is an interesting one. Bill Lee fan says Warriors need more time to heal their chemistry. I don't know if they need to heal their chemistry. I just think that more than anything, this is two teams. They got a young team and they got an old team. And their young team is not quite ready, and their old team is showing signs of slowing down, and that is a problem. So it's amazing how this year has gone for Steph Curry. He looked like an MVP at the beginning of the year. Then he becomes the all-time 3-point shooter, and really since that point, he has just struggled consistently to get it rolling. And it's just been very, very frustrating to watch him do his thing. So we have you back. We were talking a little bit about Steph Curry.
Yeah.
What do you make of the year he had? He started so fast. He breaks the record. And then there was a lot of love lobbed in his direction. And it's like, I don't know if that love, got to him or what, but man, he has struggled to find rhythm, and he looks like a player in decline ever since he broke the record. What's your assessment on his year?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I want to apologize for that internet outage. It affected my entire house for some reason. I always know it's the whole house when I use Hulu for my regular TV, and when that drops, I'm like, oh boy, there's something going on here. So sorry about that.
No problem.
So Steph and Curry, man, that's not funny. It's interesting just in the sense that he broke the 3-point record, right? And that was like a really big deal. It feels like a years ago now when that happened, but this was like December. And the decline that you're referring to started then. Like he was on fire. Like Tim Legler, one of the few voices at ESPN I really do respect in terms of his basketball opinion. Like he had all but concluded the MVP award was a lock for Steph. I don't know if folks remember that. And we all felt the same way. And then he went for the 3-point record. And it felt like he was forcing shots. There was some acknowledgement from Kerr and other individuals of the pressure of that was getting to him a bit. And we haven't seen the same Steph since. Now, it's hard for me to truly judge where he's at because I don't know if you remember this, but Steph and Drake, when Drake came back, I think his first or second came back, Steph had a monstrous game. And it looked like the old Steph. And by his own standards, this isn't like a horrible year. I mean, he's averaging 25 a clip. He's has a career high in rebounds, I believe. His assist numbers are actually going higher. What I saw from Steph was with Draymond out for the first time in his career. Like we've never seen Draymond Green miss games. Stephen Curry's never seen Draymond Green miss games, and Draymond Green is Stephen Curry's security blanket. It's his feel good. It's he feels comfy. And without Draymond, we saw Steph suddenly having to actually play point guard. We call him point guard in terms of this weird positionless basketball we see today, but he's not really the point guard. It's Draymond. Draymond's the facilitator of this offense, and he sets Curry up. He finds Curry exactly where Curry wants the ball. So I just can't judge him until we see these two players back. I don't think there's a regression. Like I haven't seen enough to determine that. Like the All-Star game, for example, was a clear sign that Steph still fully has it. I know it's the All-Star game and it's not something you should really judge a player on that much. But, I mean, if there's one thing all these players are playing for in an All-Star game, it is the MVP, right? I mean, that is an accolade they do love. And Steph was lighting it up. He shattered an All-Star game record with 16 threes, I believe. So I'm not ready to say that, man. I don't think there's a regression. I still think Steph is prime Steph. I just think when he was pursuing that 3-point record, for some reason, like it got to him. And Steph's also said something very interesting. Like there was an interview he was involved in early in the season where he might have revealed too much, but like he really opened up and he talked about how he views the season as 3 parts. Like the first part is basically the preseason and like the first, quarter or so. Then the second part's that the middle section, we're talking like December, January, February, where he clearly takes a step back from the gas pedal, right? Like, and he's shifting gears from 4 to 3. And this is the time of year where we should be seeing ramped up Steph, where he's getting ready for the playoffs, but he's hurt. And then he didn't have Dre. So I'm not ready to say that, man. Do you really think that? Like, do you think Steph's regressed?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt that his age, why wouldn't he regress? He's 33.
34 now.
Yeah. He was better last year than this year. Only Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens had the second prime. Everybody else has a prime,
and Tom Brady. Tom Brady.
You don't see too many NBA players who, I mean, there's only one LeBron. Basically, when you get to 33, 34, don't you start to decline a little bit? That's where he's at. Shouldn't he decline?
35, I believe. I love his opinion, although he's not, obviously he doesn't know everything, but I do respect his opinion tremendously. I don't know, man. It's one of those things where last year, first of all, I really think to this day, Steph got robbed of the MVP last year. Steph had such a phenomenal season. Statistically, I think last year might have been his best year. I know the 50-40-90 season is what everyone reveres as second MVP, and rightfully so, but last year, he was on fire, and he was carrying a team that had nothing beside him and Draymond. I mean, the rest of that roster was just anemic at best, and he started this season incredibly. I haven't seen enough to make that judgment. You're right, 34. He turned 34 a month ago, or not even that. It was 3 weeks ago. It was the 14th. Dude, I don't know. I understand your point that he is 34. You're absolutely right, dude. But I do want to keep in mind, too, that Steph does not have the typical NBA trajectory of starting 1 year out of college. And he played 3 years in college. So I don't think he's had the grind of a typical player who jumps out early. Like he played 3 years like Klay. And so I think the mileage of a player also comes into play. I don't think his mileage is quite of a 34-year-old NBA player. It's more like 32, in my opinion. I don't know, man. I hope not. I hope not.
I think everybody does. Everybody hopes the guy just keeps going forever, but realistically, it probably can't happen. Let's talk a little bit before we let you go on the playoffs. They were the 3 seed, maybe looking at a first round matchup with Denver. Now they're the 4 seed. Who's Golden State going to get in the first round, do you think? And are they going to be able to get out of the first round? Which was a foregone conclusion, basically much of the year.
It was, man, and I love your opinion on this as well. When I'm done talking, right now I think they play the Jazz. Right, I need to look at the standings here real quick.
4-5.
This is gonna. I mean, the whole standings. First of all, this NBA season is just crazy to me. I've never seen this much parity. I don't think anyone has. The Eastern Conference is not as good as the Western Conference. I'm glad more people are starting to come to that reality because while the Eastern Conference is more spread out in terms of talent, when you look at the top 6 or even 8, the West is just vastly superior still. But with that said, I think right now they would play the Nuggets, if I'm looking at this correctly, in the first round. I don't want that matchup. But if Draymond is the Draymond we saw last night, and we keep seeing improvement from him, and I don't know if you heard his comments from his own podcast, which is really fascinating, just in the sense that on one hand, it is very weird. We're in this like entirely new territory of players who are now becoming media members, because that is what you are, Draymond. As weird as it sounds, like you are also a media member, and he needs to be treated accordingly. So, but at least he's being forthright in his podcast, and everything he's saying is indicating he's going to be fine. Like he talks like someone who physically feels great. It's just he hasn't caught up to the game speed. And last night was the first time in a while he's done that. If we have the Draymond of old and Stephen Curry's foot injury is recovered, I think the first round is theirs. I feel confident in that. We just cannot forget the fact that even though Klay is struggling and he hasn't found that consistency yet, between Kerr, Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala, even Kevon Looney, who we forget was a part of all those championships, they have the experience to know when to turn it on. They have the experience to understand the playoff pressure, which is why I still think it's kind of laughable that teams like Memphis are so arrogant. Dillon Brooks calling their team a dynasty. Congratulations on never getting past the Western Conference semifinals. Like, it's ridiculous that you hear such brash commentary. The postseason is a entirely different game. It just, at a minimum, just in the sense of psychologically, the pressure you're feeling when every single possession matters. Every single possession counts. Like when, like you feel that, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's a fan. And the Warriors have been through so many wars, and there's enough players on this roster to have gone through that, coupled with players like Otto Porter Jr., who doesn't have the playoff experience, but has been in this league long enough, and he has the talent to really help out. There's a few other guys on the roster like that. I feel good. I feel good about the first round. As long as they're healthy, I feel good about the first round. And in all honesty, man, I'd rather play Phoenix in the second round than Memphis. I don't know about you, but yeah. I don't mind this, man. I'm actually, again, it all comes down to health. It all comes down to health for me. If this team is healthy, anything could happen. Like, anything could happen. They could win the championship, but it's a big if. Let's finish with this. Give me the one team that comes out of the East, and then tell people about what you're doing. Promote what you got going on. Oh, dude, thank you, man. Well, first of all, what are your thoughts, dude? I mean, like, because I'm in your shoes a lot, where I ask these questions, and sometimes I just forget to give my own opinion. But what's your opinion, man? Like, on what? About the Warriors postseason odds. I mean, right now they're playing the Nuggets. I think they're going one and done. I think they're going to get beat in the first round. I think, no matter what. Well, I mean, if they get Denver, I think Denver's going to take them out. They can't defend Jokic. Denver, I think, is. I don't think the Warriors can just snap their fingers and make it all better. I just don't. I think they've got a nice group of talent, but they never really came together as a team. And so they've got inconsistent rotations, and they're not inconsistent at the end of games. And you've got two different eras of players, and it hasn't all melded together. And I think it's a collection of talent, and it's, I don't think it's going to serve their purpose, short term or long term. I agree with Iguodala. They probably didn't do enough to make this team good enough, and they're going to fall short. And then in the future, as their young guys get older, if they stay, unless they move off of a couple of these guys and surround that, you have to be all in. You got to either be all in on this year, next year. This year they were 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You don't win that way, and you're not going to beat what I get. I think Jokic is as good a player as I've seen at the center spot. Him and Embiid have had phenomenal years, and I don't think the Warriors. But the Warriors can't get by an MVP big with no James Wiseman and just Kevon Looney and bad back Draymond Green. So I think they'll fight like crazy. Maybe they'll get out of the first round. But I think they're a short timer. I'd be shocked if the Warriors wind up in the conference finals. Wow. I'll rebut you with this. I would not be shocked if the Warriors won the world championship, just because I'm not forgetting that 18-2 start. I'm not forgetting that 27-6 start. I'm not forgetting even last night without Stephen Curry. And I kept making this argument all season until about a month and a half ago when I finally gave up because they were struggling for so long, I couldn't make the legitimate argument anymore of Stephen Curry being the MVP this year, simply because his value for this team is the only other comparable player is Jokic. But even I really do believe that even the Nuggets are better without Jokic than the Warriors are without Steph. Like, Steph has that much of an impact on this team. And I think if he comes back and he's healthy and he hasn't regressed like you're possibly saying, and I hope that's not the case. I haven't seen enough to really believe that yet, but I do, man. It would not shock me, just because here's a simple reason why. I do not think there is any other team out there who is really that formidable. Like, there is no one out there that makes me go, whoa, like that's the team. That's like LeBron's Lakers 2 years ago. If they were like that now, I'd probably be like, yes, dude, the Warriors are not beating that Lakers team of 2020, the bubble championship. But there's no one even like that this year. I just don't see anyone out there that gives me fear, that makes me really that concerned. I mean, this is why I think the Warriors, and you're right, this is where Myers could have totally failed, because this window was there for him and still is. And all he had to do was get one or two more pieces, right? Even that 5% difference of a player coming in for improvement could have been the difference. And still, so yeah, I mean, if that's a difference, that's going to really piss me off in the offseason. If Myers not doing that was the single-handed thing where it goes to a game 7 of a Western Conference Finals, and that's the difference, like, I'm going to be pissed. But I have hope, man. I really do. I hope I am not wearing my homer cards and saying this, but given how strong they started, and I'm seeing this comment there, the Warriors team peaked too early, I will respond to that by saying they didn't really start struggling until Draymond got hurt, right? And he's the second best player on this team. Like, when he got hurt, when Draymond got injured, the Warriors, I believe, still had the best record in the NBA. So I don't believe they peaked. I believe just injuries got to them. I love the comment, two comments earlier, by the way, from the Billy Lee fan. I haven't heard that my entire life, but I think that's really funny. No, it's Miley. I think it's making fun of my name. No, I'll do more power to you. I love that. But yeah, I am, man. I am confident that even though all these calamities are occurring, and I say calamities loosely, even though that's, it's just sports, but yeah, I think they have a shot, dude. The experience
all I gotta say is this, though. Think about it. I mean, let's not ignore the obvious here. How many teams in the history of the NBA have lost 7 of 8 down the stretch and won the NBA title?
If I remember, none. But if I remember correctly,
probably none.
But probably not. But if I remember correctly, in the Warriors' last Kevin Durant season, they limped into the playoffs. Like, they were like, that team was like, just, they did not look like a team that had it together.
Did they win?
And they were just one Durant injury away from winning a third straight championship.
Okay. But they had Durant. I mean, seriously, you're talking about arguably the greatest collection of offensive talent, I don't know, in the history of the NBA. Maybe it's a little bit different. Cy, we'll let you go, man.
All right, brother.
We could rap like this for hours.
Well, no, and by the way,
go ahead.
For people, you asked me to promote stuff.
Yeah, promote stuff. Promote what you got going on
in an hour and a half on Locked On Warriors. So we'll continue this there, man. Except I'm going to be asking you the questions and getting your insights. So
there you go, Locked On Warriors. I'll be doing all the talking. I'll have a cup of coffee and we'll get it done. But and also, Cy, you're going to be with me after Warrior playoff games on YouTube.
Heck yeah, dude.
Man, all these people in the chat.
We're going to be celebrating, my man. We're going to be celebrating if they're healthy. If
they're healthy. Otherwise, I'll be basking in the fact that I was right. And
we'll do some shots together, like, more
there you go.
Dub Nation. Yeah.
There we go. I don't know if that's allowed on YouTube, but we'll throw some back. There we go.
Can't pass anything through the screen, unfortunately. But we can.